Thank you, Dean. Wow. You know, I get to speak at the annual meeting of the electric cooperatives, and there's like 5,000 people in the room. I'm more nervous today than I am there. I don't get it. Seriously, thank you, Dean Rutherford, faculty and staff, students, and special guests. What I'm going to talk about today is pretty simple. Now, I know our business gets a little bit complex. I was joking with Dwayne Hiley backstage that if this gets into a discussion on generation, I'm not a generation expert. I'm a co-op manager. I manage a co-op that has 36,000 meters in North Arkansas and have the privilege until March of next year of serving as president of NRECA, National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. And I have a problem with glasses. I can't read with them or I can't read without them. So, but I did look, Dean, on your website, and I want to read this. There's a striking resemblance here to what co-ops are all about, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Because most people, and even over lunch, we were talking about, what is a co-op? And I know a lot of people in here know what co-ops are. You guys and girls may get a little bit bored talking about this, but so many people today don't understand why we were created, and a lot of people don't really know why we do what we do. But Dean, in your vision statement, we believe in moral leadership that includes integrity, compassion, and commitment to social justice. Therefore, public servants must listen to and learn from diverse groups, compromise and build alliances, and take strategic and decisive action to advance the common good. Sounds a lot to me like what co-ops do. As I looked through the student profiles, and there are a lot, in the public service areas of interest, I saw healthcare, education, literacy, poverty, nutrition, and rural development. And you could pretty much sum that up into 3 words: quality of life. And that's the business that we are in. That's the business that co-ops are in, what I call the quality of life business. 134 years ago this week, on September the 4th, Thomas Edison fired up the world's very first central station electric power plant, and that was on Pearl Street in Manhattan. In the 50 years that followed, electricity steadily marched its way through our nation's population centers. With electricity came safer, healthier, and an easier way of life. Electric lighting, and a lot of us don't remember this, electric lighting replaced gas and kerosene lamps. Electric appliances made short work of routine chores like cooking and cleaning. The 20s may have been a roaring time for a lot of people, but they weren't for people on the farm. For rural America, life was still mired in the 19th century, and less than 3% of American farms had electric power in those days. Farmers would rise way before dawn to milk cows by the light of a kerosene lantern. Household chores that took minutes in the city were a day-long ordeal for rural America. If you needed fresh water, you didn't get it from a faucet. You walked out to the well and you pumped it by hand. If that water needed to be hot, you fired up a wood stove. If clothes needed to be washed, you didn't have a washing machine. They soaked in a tub and they were scrubbed on a board. So life without electricity truly was difficult for rural America. And it was also dangerous. Their stoves and their lanterns filled the air with smoke and with soot. So a lack of running water, too, obviously, made hygiene and sanitation much more difficult. And that farmer that was milking his cows in a barn, you can imagine a barn full of cows with a straw floor and a wood barn, and a cow kicking over a lantern, and how dangerous that can be. But beyond the drudgery and the danger, farms without electricity were much less productive than those with electricity. That meant less food to feed a growing nation, an issue that would become a national security issue during World War II. And after decades of struggling to electrify the countryside, we finally found a solution. Our solution was quintessentially American, and what I believe is one of our nation's finest examples of a productive partnership between the federal government, private enterprise, and the American people, and that was the electric cooperative movement. Electric co-ops are private, nonprofit organizations that are owned and governed by the people that we serve. A board of directors is elected by and from the membership. It ensures that we operate in the interest of our members. Cooperatives offer efficiency, adaptability, fiscal discipline, coupled with the social consciousness, and this goes back to what I read about this school and your mission, but coupled with social consciousness and human connection of a not-for-profit, community-based organization. Co-ops are not unique to the utility industry. Ag co-ops today, all across this country, help farmers bring their crops to market. Credit unions, which have more than 100 million members, are financial cooperatives. Sunkist, Land O'Lakes, Dairy Farmers of America, Ocean Spray, they're all co-ops. True Value, Ace Hardware, they're co-ops. And I don't know if any of you are hikers and campers, but if you've ever been to that store called REI, it's a co-op. Those who follow current events are no doubt familiar with the Associated Press. It's a co-op. All cooperatives, regardless of type, are governed by a set of 7 principles. First is voluntary and open membership. Second is democratic member control. Third is members' economic participation. Fourth is autonomy and independence. Fifth is education, training, and information. Our 6th principle, cooperation among cooperatives. And our 7th, and I think probably one of the best, is concern for the communities that we live in. Today, there are more than 900 electric cooperatives in 47 states serving 42 million Americans. We operate and maintain a little less than half of the power grid, 2.6 million miles of electric line, and by the way, if you want to check that out, you can go to the moon 5 times and back, and that's about how many miles of lines that we have. The largest electric co-op in the United States is Pedernales down in Texas. It's 260,000 members in the Texas Hill Country. And there was a young congressman from that area. His name was Lyndon Johnson, and President Johnson was Congressman Johnson at that time, was very instrumental in the founding of Pedernales. The smallest co-op, INN Electric in Alaska, has 285 meters. The average co-op serves a little more than 13,000 meters, and mine, North Arkansas Electric, 36,000 meters, which makes us the 5th largest in the state of our 17 electric distribution co-ops. Together, we serve about 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses in the state. You know, our story is just one of many that illustrate the self-reliance and the resolve of rural America to refuse to give in to what we call the tyranny of low expectations. Today, co-ops are a significant force in the American energy industry, but the origins of the movement are decidedly grassroots. For decades, farmers in rural communities were clamoring for electricity, but the for-profit electric companies of the day showed little interest in serving us. The federal government had been encouraging those investor-owned utilities to extend their lines into rural America. Commissions were set up. Studies were conducted, but little progress was made. The utilities claimed it was too expensive, too difficult to build lines in sparsely populated rural areas. The power companies had grown accustomed to reaping large profits, and they didn't think they would be able to extract the same profits from the rural areas. A few of the most profitable and easy to connect areas did receive power, but the vast majority of rural America sat in darkness. In 1935, after decades of struggling to bring power to the countryside, President Roosevelt sought $100 million for rural electrification as part of his $5 billion public works bill. And he got it. On May 11, 1935, he signed an executive order creating the Rural Electrification Administration, and about a year later, in May of 1936, Congress passed the REA Act. By the way, it's a very interesting debate. If you're truly interested, like a lot of us in this room are, about rural electrification, we were talking a few years back, and Congressman Marion Barry came up to me and he said, "Have you ever read the debate that led up to the REA Act of 1936? And I said, no. He had one of his staffers send me about that much of the congressional record. That's a lot to read, but it's very interesting reading to see how the REA Act came about. But the government's first instinct, even after the passage of the act, was not to work with the farmers directly. Rather, their plan was to use the cash to entice investor-owned utilities to finally build lines to rural areas. 9 days after the REA was formed, the head of the agency met with leaders from the largest power companies. And at first, they seemed receptive. But when it came back with a formal proposal a couple months later, their grand plan for rural electrification, pay attention to this, and I don't want anybody in here to think, some of my best friends are for-profit utilities. I'm not knocking the for-profit business model. I'm just building up the cooperative business model. I get it. My wife owns a business. She's in it to take care of kids first off. Second of all, she's in it to turn some profit. So if you have a for-profit business, you have to make money. I get it. I know that's why they're in business. But this is so true today. And Dean, you talked about broadband. Their grand plan back then, 1936, consisted of taking the money and hooking up a few 100,000 customers in the easiest to serve places. We're seeing the same thing today in broadband. Despite the incentives, it was clear that the power companies had no interest in serving rural areas on the scale envisioned by the REA. Next, the agency turned its attention to municipal power systems. Perhaps they could extend their lines out from the city into the countryside. But there were legal and logistical problems with the municipalities that served customers outside of the city limits. They couldn't do it. While federal officials struggled to find a solution by working with established industry players, farm groups were begging the REA to try a radically different approach. Let the farmers help themselves. 2 decades before the creation of the REA, farmers in a few communities took it upon themselves to form co-ops. By 1930, there were 46 electric co-ops in the United States in 13 states. But it was hard for these early co-ops to secure financing. Despite their limited reach, these co-ops proved that the farmers were up to the task. If they could get low-interest loans from the REA, co-ops could be the answer. The farmers continued to press their case. The REA issued their first loans to cooperatives, and those were in Indiana, Georgia, and Tennessee. In November of 1935, the first pole financed by an REA loan was set in the ground at an electric co-op in Ohio. In March of 1936, the first REA-financed power line was in Bartlett, Texas. By the end of 1936, 100 co-ops existed in 26 states across the country, and they had signed loan contracts with the REA. Well, here in Arkansas, our state's first electric cooperative, conveniently named First Electric Co-op, Don is the CEO of First Electric. We're glad to see you here. Was incorporated in Jacksonville in 1937. A year later, they energized their first line. By 1940, co-ops were serving 1 million members across the country. As the program took off, investor-owned utilities realized the folly of their ways, and they actually tried to stop the growth of electric co-ops. They used their political clout back then to stop co-ops from gaining access to copper wire and other materials that were needed to build power systems. They claimed the materials would be put to better use in some other area. In 1942, co-ops formed the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. of which I'm currently serving through March, as I said, as president, to fight for their interest in Washington and to provide services to the co-ops across the country. One of NRECA's first tasks was to disprove the allegations made by the investor-owned utilities showing that electrified farms actually played a vital role in a war effort by providing and producing more food than farms could without electricity. It was the first of many such battles that co-ops would fight to preserve our existence in the decades that followed. In 1943, NRECA hired its first general manager. He was a fiery Democratic congressman from the great state of Arkansas, and his name was Clyde T. Ellis. And if you haven't read his book, A Giant Step, I would encourage you to do so. It's quite a book. By 1946, 50% of U.S. farms had electricity. The progress continued over the decades from Alaskan villages that you could only reach by boat or by bush plane, Native American lands in the deserts of New Mexico, until electric service was available to all who wanted it. As a movement that had its origins in the Depression era, and one that was formed to serve some of the nation's most economically disenfranchised citizens, electric co-ops are sensitive to regulations. We are very sensitive to mandates, and we're very sensitive to any regulation or mandate that could impact the affordability of the service that we provide to our members. And while I don't want to get into a big debate on what our positions are, I will briefly mention that all of that and the concern for our members and the affordability of their electric bill and their quality of life is a big part of the reason why in 2009 we opposed the Waxman-Markey cap and trade bill. And it's a big reason why now, today, we oppose the President's new carbon regulations. And before I go on, let me say this. Electric cooperatives are as good of a steward of the environment as any business, as any group of people in the U.S., if not more so. You know, we have kids and grandkids too, and I always like to, when I have a chance to mention my grandkids, Jack, Tucker, Kennedy, Madeline, I do so. I care about them. I care about my grandkids. I care about their future on this planet. There's no tie between our position on the Clean Power Plan and the environmental concern that we have for this planet, because we live here too. The Clean Power Plan is not the answer. NRECA and half of the states sued over EPA's Clean Power Plan. You probably read about it in a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court issued only the second stay in the history of the Clean Air Act, and it was issued in the Clean Power Plan. And we felt at the time that that happened that that was a clear signal to the D.C. Court of Appeals that it would be struck down. And we felt like that the D.C. Court would get that message and that they might possibly strike it down. And then we lost Justice Scalia a few days later. So all bets were off on how that ends up. In our opinion, as co-ops, we must have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. Yes, that means coal, that means gas, that means hydro, and we've got a lot of it here in this state, wind, solar, and biomass. We believe in all of it. It's important to remember that we're not trying to keep costs down so we can sell more product and make more money. We were talking about energy efficiency at lunch today. I don't know of any other business that does our very best to teach our members how not to buy our product. Think about that. How many businesses teach their customers how not to buy their product? That's what we do, and it's called energy efficiency, and it's the right thing to do, and we do it. Any profit that we make goes back to our members in the form of capital credits. We try to keep costs low because we're looking out for the people that we serve. And many of those folks can't afford to see their power bill go up. America's electric cooperatives serve 327 of the nation's 353 poorest, persistent poverty counties. That's 93% of our nation's most economically vulnerable places, including 17 counties right here in Arkansas. Back home in our co-ops, we deal every day, I know Don and his folks do, I know I do, we deal every day with people who can't pay their bill. They're honest, hardworking folks living paycheck to paycheck, and they're just trying to scrape by. A $10 to $20 increase in an electric bill may not be a lot for those of us in this room, but I can tell you that we have members that that's a lot of money. A few years back, when we had problems with deliveries of coal to our coal-fired generating stations, I had a lady from Horseshoe Bend, Arkansas. Many of you know where Horseshoe Bend is. She called me. She was not mad, and she said, I want to tell you a story. My electric bill, she was 91 years old. True story. John, I think y'all probably heard this. I've used it at my annual meeting. She said, I figured out how to pay my electric bill. I'm going to take my medication every other day. She was going to cut her medication in half so she could pay her electric bill. Folks, that's our concern right there. Our concern is the person on the other side of the meter, and that's a valid concern when you look at the Clean Power Plan. One of the arguments used by supporters of new regulations is that the cost to shut down coal-fired power plants will be absorbed by power companies and their Wall Street investors and not felt by consumers. Well, it may be true for investor-owns, but it's not true for co-ops. If co-ops were forced to shutter perfectly good power plants with years of remaining useful life, proponents are correct when they say the company and its owners will bear the cost. The problem is the owners of our company are not a bunch of faceless Wall Street investors. I don't mean that in a bad way. They're farmers, ranchers, teachers, veterans, and retirees that live on our lines. And the great irony of the current dilemma is that co-ops are heavily dependent on coal-fired power plants because of a previous government mandate called the Fuel Use Act. When we faced the oil embargo of the 1970s, the federal government urged electric co-ops to build new power plants fueled with American coal. The goal was to increase our domestic energy security by reducing our dependence on foreign oil. It was a noble goal, and we as co-ops did as we were told. But the power plants are not short-term investments. With proper maintenance and upgrades to the latest technology, the useful life of a power plant spans many decades. Major upgrades are typically financed with long-term debt, and it could be years before those debts are paid off. To retire a plant while it still has a mortgage would effectively force co-op members to pay twice for the same power. Co-ops are not fighting to forestall change or innovation. We face change, we face challenge, and the good news is the American spirit flows in the hearts of every co-op. The co-op business model is remarkably flexible. When the only thing you care about is taking care of the people and the places that you serve, you're free to try a lot of new ideas. And our smaller size lets us focus on those new ideas and how it will affect our members. Electric co-ops have long been innovators in the industry. We try new things all the time, and when one co-op discovers something that works, we share it with all co-ops. Just this year, our National Association has won more than $20 million in awards and grants to support research into renewable energy, cybersecurity, grid reliability, and other energy innovations. In 2014, the Solar Electric Power Association said that 3 of the nation's top 4 solar utilities in this country were electric cooperatives. Right here in Arkansas, our statewide electric cooperative association has created a subsidiary called Today's Power Incorporated, and they design and they build solar installations. We've built utility-scale community solar projects for electric co-ops in the region. They offer modular, ready-to-assemble solar kits for residential and small commercial applications. And as a matter of fact, by this time next year, my co-op will have a 1 megawatt solar farm on the ground in North Arkansas that we will be able to market to our members. I know Ozarks Electric has theirs already on the ground and operational. And Dwayne, I think the project that you had with Ouachita in South Arkansas for the Aerojet Rocketdyne project was 12 megawatts and is the largest solar operation in the state of Arkansas. In January of this year, the electric cooperative that serves the Hawaiian island of Kauai, they have 2 large solar installations. 77% of their energy is coming from their renewable energy portfolio in the state of Hawaii. And again, that's a co-op. Up in Minnesota, a wholesale power co-op called Great River Energy has been getting a lot of national attention for a project called the Community Storage Initiative. And this is actually designed using electric water heaters as thermal batteries to store wind energy. Now, this wind energy is generated overnight when consumption is lower to reduce the need for electricity generated by fossil fuels during the day when demand for electricity is higher. At a modern coal-fired plant in Wyoming, electric co-ops are building an integrated test center where researchers can explore the viability of technologies designed to capture and beneficially reuse carbon. This facility will help support the $20 million X Prize competition to develop new technologies that will convert CO2 emissions into valuable products like building materials, alternative fuels, and other items that we use every day. The common thread through all of these projects is that they're responding to local challenges. They're responding to local challenges and consumer desires by finding solutions that work best for the local community. In many cases, they can also make use of government incentives to increase the viability of the project. But the government involvement in these projects comes in the form of a carrot and not a stick. Yeah, I was reading that a couple days ago, and I thought, many of you in this room aren't old enough to remember this. Many of us are. But in September of 1962, in his famous speech, his moon speech, President Kennedy, I believe it was at Rice University, said, and I quote, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade not because it's easy, but because it's hard." You know, he used the word we. There was no mandate in that. What he meant and what happened was it was a public-private partnership. That's how you get things done. And you get it done with time, and you get it done with technology. The history of the electric co-op movement demonstrates that good things can happen when the government partners with private enterprise to solve big problems. Think about what a remarkable feat it was just to electrify rural America. Millions of miles of line stretched across 75% of the nation's landmass. All of it done with incentives, not mandates. Incentives that were paid back in full, on time, and with interest. A lot of people today still believe that the REA was a handout program. All of the incentives were paid back in full, on time, with interest. The American spirit of electric co-ops is not just a relic of the Depression era. It lives and breathes across rural America today. We're working to find innovative solutions to other urgent technology challenges that face all of us in rural America: access to reliable and affordable broadband. Just a couple weeks ago, the New York Times published a story on the efforts of some electric co-ops to bring broadband to their communities. And as I said earlier, the parallels between broadband today and the lack of electricity 80 years ago and who was going to bring it to rural America are astounding. The parallels are astounding. Reliable, high-speed internet access is critical for attracting new employers to small communities. What new employer, what new business would set up in a community where you're getting 3 or 5 or 10 megabits per second. They're all in desperate need of an economic boost that broadband would bring. Just think what it would do for education and for health care. And yes, for all the Amazon shoppers, it makes it quicker. As an 82-year-old co-op member from Oklahoma said in a story about broadband, and I quote, "The co-op is doing it again, but now the light bulb is the internet." 3 Arkansas co-ops, and I'm proud to say that mine is one of them, have broadband fiber to the home, not only on the drawing board, but we at my co-op are hanging fiber as we speak today. 2 other co-ops in the state are also looking at it, and many others, I think, will follow suit. As I said, the parallels to power, or to the lack of power in rural America 80 years ago, and as I said, I get it. I understand the for-profit business model, but rural Arkansas, rural America doesn't fit the business model of most of the internet providers. But it does fit our business model, and it's what we're in business for. Finally, there's one more way I believe that electric co-ops embody the best parts of the American spirit. We are blessed to live in the greatest nation in the world, to whom much is given, much is expected. For more than 50 years, America's electric co-ops have lived up to that expectation. And a lot of you, I'm sure, are unaware of this, but we have an international program that has been operating for 50 years. We bring electricity to developing countries all over the world. The program was started under President Kennedy in 1962 as a way to generate goodwill for America, and in Kennedy's eyes, to help fight the spread of communism. Since its creation, NRECA International have brought electricity to 110 million people in 42 countries around the world. 110 million people today have electricity because of co-ops. And we were talking about it at lunch today, Dwayne. I believe we've got 13 men leaving for Bolivia from Arkansas, from Don's co-op, from my co-op, from other co-ops in the state that will go to Bolivia, and they will bring electricity to people for the first time, just like our forefathers did us 80 years ago. 2012, I had the opportunity to go to Guatemala with lineman from Indiana, and it was my first, really, I didn't know much about our international program until I went. When we were over there, the Indiana linemen were electrifying villages, and I mean literally in the middle of nowhere. We went to Guatemala City and we drove for 12 hours, and we ended up almost at the southwestern Mexican border. Beautiful mountains, rainforest, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 feet. It was incredible. A little girl came up to me, and her name was Esna. And she said in Spanish, which had to be translated, "Would you bring power to my home?" And it was very touching that these people had walked 2 hours in a driving rainstorm to talk to us to see if the next project would be their village. So came back, talked to Dwayne Hiley, and Dwayne made it a priority of his. We talked to the 17 co-ops in the state of Arkansas, and we became actively involved in the NRECA International Program. 2014, I believe it was our first project, 13 or 14. And guess what village we electrified? Don, I'll never forget, one of your linemen, I don't make this stuff up, folks. Linemen are tough, but they have a heart. Came up to me with tears in his eyes, and he said, "I found her." And I didn't know what he was talking about. He found Esna. He found the reason that we were in Guatemala, and they gave her power for the first time ever. And she was, at the time, 13 or 14 years old. Here's the comparison. Next door to Esna was her grandmother, who was 92 years old. Her grandmother had lived her entire life without electricity, and on that day, she saw her granddaughter get electricity and the beginning of the changing for a better quality of life for that village in Guatemala. That is what we do internationally. One other story, and Dean, I don't want to go over my time here, but international is my passion with NRECA. We've had a lot of issues going on with NRECA the last couple of years, but I've tried to focus on international. NRECA had a presence at both the RNC and DNC, and I attended RNC and was on a panel called the Global Oval with some folks from the One Foundation, which is Bono's group, interested in improving life abroad. On that panel with us was Congressman Ted Yoho of Florida. Now, you probably don't know Ted Yoho, but some people call him Dr. No. He's against any type of foreign aid that comes before him. Ted Yoho was one of our biggest supporters in the Electrify Africa Act, which in today's Congress, today's environment, for anything to pass with unanimous consent is incredible. The Electrify Africa Act that NRECA and our partners pushed through Congress passed with unanimous consent and was signed by the President. In that summit at the RNC, Ted Yoho said his colleagues were coming up to him saying, "Ted, you've lost your mind. You're always against foreign aid. Why are you for this Electrify Africa Act?" And he said, I turned around and said, "Because it's the right thing to do." That is an amazing story about how that passed this Congress. He also said, talking about the work that NRECA does, he looked at me and he said, "What you do, you empower people with power that changes their lives forever." So that's just a brief update on what we do in the international program. It's so rewarding. We'll look forward to hearing our guys come back from Bolivia and tell the stories that happened down there, and we're excited about that. As I was preparing for this event, I couldn't help but think how divided our country is and how deeply fractured our politics are in this country. It doesn't seem like we can agree on much of anything. But the more time we spend working for doing business with a co-op, you'll start to look around and wonder what other challenges that we might be able to solve with the co-op model. Many of you might think I'm in the electric business, and I've said this before time and time again. I don't consider myself to be in the electric business. I consider myself to be in the quality of life business. That's what we're in. But when we get up every day, we get up for the betterment of the quality of life for the member who is on the other side of our meter. So when you drive down a country road zipping past power poles that dot the landscape, remember that you're driving past a piece of history, a symbol of what American people are capable of doing when they put aside political differences and stop coming up with excuses on why something is too hard to accomplish. And couldn't we all learn from that today? It's when we unite behind a common purpose and work to achieve the common good. In his first inaugural address, the man for whom this building is named said, "Profound and powerful forces are shaking and remaking our world, and the urgent question of our time is whether we can make change our friend and not our enemy." In that same speech, President Clinton famously proclaimed, "There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America." Well, I'm going to close it out here, and I don't know if we have time for any questions, but we will here in a second. I've got two quick things I want to share with you, and the first is a short story that I shared with our annual meeting folks back in February when co-ops get together, and there's 4,000 or 5,000 of us. And I thought this was pretty cool, but many of you remember George Burns and Gracie Allen. I know the gray hair in the room remembers George and Gracie. Gracie Allen wrote George a letter, last letter she wrote to George before he passed away. And in that letter, Gracie said, "Never place a period where God has placed a comma." Now, the point of that is this. Rural electrification is not something that we did. It is something that we're doing. Community transformation is not something we did. It's something we're doing. We are developing the next generation of leaders. We're investing in broadband when others won't. We're leading the way on distributed energy. We are building a smarter power grid. We are luring businesses to our towns, and we are making lives better for our members and for our communities. Yes, we all know that the energy industry is going through a time of unprecedented change. The path forward is very complicated. It's long. We've had a lot of successes already, and I'm sure we'll make some mistakes, but we'll have a lot more successes in the future. But there's nothing that we face that we can't overcome with the strength of the co-op movement, because we are powered by the collective strength of 900 co-ops, 900 plus across this United States, 42 million Americans in 47 states. We are a movement that is of, by, and for the people. And as I told some folks last week, I wouldn't bet against us because we're moving. For those of you in the room that are students, this is such an incredible school. You are so, and I'm guessing a lot of you are back there or scattered all over here. Just a short message to you, and this is just something I wrote down because, you know, I was a student at one point, thinking back on it. But we also talked to a lot of our co-op folks today, especially in the new professions who have just come on. But I would encourage you to engage and make a difference. Do what you love and love what you do. But whatever you do, engage and make a difference. It's up to us. It's up to you. Don and I have heard a young lady by the name of Kat Cole speak. She is currently the CEO of Cinnabon. She started out at, I believe, 18 years old, working in a Hooters. I think by 21, she was in charge of their international operations. Today, she is over several companies. And she always likes to say in her seminars, and I love this, if not me, who? And if not now, when? And I would submit to you that it is you, and the time is now, so go out and make a difference. Enjoy what you do, and hopefully you will bring a lot of success to this world. Dean, thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We do have some time for questions. Okay, we've got hands up, and we'll wait for the microphone to get to you, okay?
Thank you for coming.
Yes,
I grew up on a small farm in West Tennessee, and my grandfather said many times the greatest blessing in his lifetime was rural electrification. Would you say something about the burden that ice storms and fires and so on have put on your organizations, and thank you for handling it so well?
Two things. The Tennessee connection is amazing because that's, you hear a lot of co-op folks talk about the next greatest thing. And I'll probably get the quote wrong, but a gentleman stood up in a Tennessee church 80 years ago and said the greatest thing is to have the love of God in your heart, and the next greatest thing is to have electricity in your home. And that came from Tennessee. Certainly disasters, ice storms, y'all have had ice storms down here in central Arkansas. I think in 2000, maybe 2003 or 4, we had a devastating ice storm up north in 2009. 2008, we had almost everything imaginable hit us. In 2008, we had straight line windstorm. We had an F4 tornado. We had 2 historic floods. This was all in 2008. Hurricane Ike actually came up and got us, and I made the statement, what else can happen? January 27th of 2009, we had an ice storm that took out 20% of our system. So yeah, ice storms, fires, whatever, cause a lot of problems for us. But I will tell you, I think that's when all of us, investor-owned utilities, co-ops, we all shine. That's our unfortunately, to say it this way, that's our proudest moment when we can actually go out and work hard for the member. My guys don't want to quit. If we have an ice storm, you know, there becomes an issue with safety of how long you can work, but our men just want to keep working and working and until they get everybody back on. If I have an ice storm, Don will send me crews. Dwayne might send some crews up from the state. And this is the great thing about co-op. You remember, the hurricane that just came across Florida. A week prior to that, co-ops were sending crews to position themselves to be ready for that hurricane from other co-ops that were not going to get hit. And investor owners do the same thing, but that's what we do. When times get tough, we really get tougher. But yeah, it's challenging.
Yes, question right here at the back. We'll get.
Thank you for the news about your solar farm. Would like to see more of that. I've been working with renewable energy policy for a while, and what is your reason that the co-ops are opposing the Clean Power Plan? Because we'd really like to see more renewable energy, and that there are a lot of things in the way of that right now in Arkansas.
Well, one thing about co-ops, we've decided a long time ago we're not going to be against everything or that comes up. And I think when you're talking about the Clean Power Plan, it's more about what we're for than what we're against. We as I said, we think the Clean Power Plan is not a good document. If we've got generating stations that have to be shut down, somebody's going to have to pay for them. And it as I said, it takes an all of the above energy strategy in our opinion. But I think the two things that are missing in the Clean Power Plan, and I told this to the administrator, I had two meetings with the administrator, is time and technology. And I think with time and technology, that heals all problems. Co-ops do not get, if you look at our resolutions, and we're driven by a resolutions process, we don't get mired down and involved in the climate change debate. You've got folks over here that say it's happening. You got folks over here that say it's not happening. We stay out of that. We talk about the affordability and the reliability of electric power. That is our number one concern. And we feel like that the Clean Power Plan, 32% reduction by 2030. First of all, I don't believe and that's the current numbers, right? Dwayne, 32% by 2030. I don't believe that can be achieved. The authors of the Clean Air Act even admitted themselves that it was never intended to regulate carbon. The stranded assets is a big problem for us. The fact that we could have a 10 to 20% increase in rates for people who can't afford to pay their electric bill is a big problem for us, and the reliability. And in our calculations with NRECA, a loss of 360,000 jobs annually. Now, having said that, and by the way, a $1 trillion GDP loss, but having said that, time and technology does a lot. And I gave y'all some examples of things that are going on. We're working on solar, we're working on energy storage. We've got the project going on out in Wyoming with CO2 and the X Prize. I truly believe the timetable is too short. If that timetable were lengthened, which it won't be, but if it were lengthened, it could probably be a workable deal. That's Mel's theory, not my national association's. But no, there are a lot of things we're for. We just don't feel like that document is the correct way to do it.
Somebody, you had a question right here, then we'll get back there right up here, Bob.
Thank you. So I was going to talk about broadband, but you've kind of addressed all that. I think I see the reasons why. When you go back to the Clean Power Plan, are you not in danger of maybe having to replace your coal production? If you look at what public utilities are doing, going ahead and shutting down coal now, going to gas because it's cheaper.
Oh yeah, we're definitely in danger. Now I'm going to be quite frank and upfront with you. I'm a distribution guy. We've got the generation guy right here in the room that is an expert on all that. But from a distribution guy's point of view, yeah, we're in danger. The two plants in Arkansas are, potentially in danger. If the Clean Power Plan were enacted, it would create havoc with our coal-fired assets. And I'm one that thinks that gas is next. I don't know in what form that would come, but I don't feel like that they would stop with coal. But you get to a point of reliability. Mandated renewables are not the answer. The way we approach renewables is the answer, but to have a mandate by a certain date in time is just not the way to do it.
Yes, sir, and then we get the back, yeah, we're up here, and then, yeah.
When we talk about renewable energy, do you have any numbers on the percentages that the co-ops have for hydro and for wind and for solar?
Dwayne, why don't you give him the numbers in Arkansas, because those are on the tip of your tongue.
Currently, the Arkansas cooperatives have about 18%. Actually, by the end of next year, we'll be producing about 18% of our energy from non-emitting sources. That includes hydro and wind and some solar. Thank you.
All right, question up behind, yeah.
My name is Amy Alexander. I'm a first-year Clinton School student, and I'm on the team that will be doing the case study with Arkansas Electric Co-op. And I was just wondering, this is broadband deployment is something I care a lot about. I'm from a rural area that doesn't have access. And so I was wondering, I guess some methods or how can we get more young people involved in kind of the broadband deployment struggle? Or what are some specific methods that people can use to get involved, co-op customers, young people? How can we help, I guess is what I'm asking.
So how would co-ops encourage people to get involved in?
So as co-op customers, as young people, as Clinton School students, as a practicum team that's going to be working a lot with this, how can we help? And
How can you help? Okay, I've got it. Well, I think the biggest thing is just spreading the word. It's amazing when we talk about broadband back in the co-op. In fact, our first round of publicity just went out about 10 days ago, and it's heated up, and people are talking about it on the streets, and everybody wants it today. Unfortunately, my project is going to be a 3 to 5 year project, but everybody wants it now, and they want to be first. But no, I think as far as how people can help, mainly is talk it up. We're hanging fiber today, the backbone fiber, and we have hopes of having our first connected members in at least by January of next year, and then moving on to phase 2. But I think you could be a big help. We're going to do our best to spread the word, and any assistance that we could have from folks like you would just be great.
Mel, what town, what those customers in north central Arkansas, where will that be?
What we've done, Dean, we've taken a sliver of our service territory that we think is a representative sample. We've got we've got some obvious lines that we have to do. One of them is going to be out of Salem through Mammoth Spring into Missouri, because that's where we're going to connect and hit a pipeline up there. That's going to get, and by the way, it's not just broadband, it will be broadband. If anybody wants dial-up service for phone, it'll be that as well, and TV. But we will hit a pipeline that gets into Missouri fiber that will get us into St. Louis, and then we'll go west out of Salem. We'll hit the Mountain Home area. We've got a substation that we want to hit with fiber, so we've taken a slice out of Mountain Home west. So we've got about, I think it's 1,500 members on this first round that we hope to, and what we are wanting in this is a 50% or better take rate, and we feel like that we'll get it.
That's great. Okay, we got time. Any other questions? We're running out of time. Yeah, we got one right here, Josh. Hold on just a minute. Final question. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Coleman.
Yes, sir.
My name is Josh Steiner. I am another first year serving here at the Clinton School, and I will also be serving on the practicum team with the co-ops. I know that you had said that it sounded like residents were really essential in getting input from residents was really essential in establishing the foundation and success for the co-ops initially. I was wondering, is that still essential today? And if so, how do you gather that input from your residents?
How do we gather the input from our members? Several different ways. Number one, we survey our members. Now we're in small towns, so we know a lot of these people. One-on-one contacts, surveys of our members. We do surveys all the time, asking our members We have newsletters, we have publications, we get them involved. Grassroots is one of our big things. And whether it's a political issue or talking about broadband or whatever, we have a database of our members that we can engage at pretty much any given time, and we do that on occasion, but mainly through our publications, through our grassroots, and one-on-one contacts in the small areas.
Let's, for those that want to visit with Mel, he'll be here shortly after the meeting, but let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you all very much.